In April 2020, the UFC began hosting events from its Apex Performance Institute as a means of getting around travel restrictions due to the COVID-19 pandemic. While the setup allowed the UFC to keep operating, it led to a lower threshold of fighters entering the promotion. Today we look at the outcasts and misfits to grace the company during one of its most turbulent eras. Welcome to the INC, and these are 5 of the worst fighters from the Apex era. Harry Hunsucker is best known for 2 things: a name straight out of a Charles Dickens novel and one of the most maligned UFC tenures of all time. Hunsucker made his debut in 2015, competing mainly in his home state of Kentucky, where he developed a reputation for lightning-quick finishes or being knocked out in spectacular fashion, such as what happened in his Contender Series match with Jared Vanderaa. Hunsucker's appearance, however, gave him an inroad with the UFC, and when Don'Tale Mayes withdrew from his bout with Tai Tuivasa, Hunsucker stepped in on 4 days' notice to keep the Australian on the card, being finished in 49 seconds with Tuivasa seemingly guilty of the circumstances around the fight. Hunsucker was given a second chance against another Samoan in Justin Tafa, but his appearance was overshadowed when Tafa became the first UFC heavyweight to miss the 265-pound weight limit. Hunsucker hoped his opponent's troubles would give him an advantage come fight night. It didn't.
Takedown attempt there for Hunt. Oh! That'll do it! Holy smokes!
In an attempt to salvage his career, Hunsucker announced a move to light heavyweight and was inexplicably given a main card spot against Tyson Pedro at UFC 278. A new weight class didn't change Hunsucker's fortunes, being rocked by a jab before succumbing to a body kick early in the first round. It proved the final straw for the UFC, who axed Hunsucker from the promotion after 3 first-round losses and just 3 minutes and 48 seconds of ring time. Hunsucker hasn't competed in MMA since the loss and currently holds a record of 7 wins and 6 losses. It took just 14 seconds to prove Martin Sano wasn't UFC level. Sano had an encouraging start to his MMA career, winning his first 4 fights including a submission over UFC welterweight Jeff Neal, but had only fought 3 times over the past 7 years, with his last win coming in 2014. So why was the Spartan given a match against Matthew Semelsberger at UFC 266? The card's build had been dominated by Nick Diaz. The MMA legend was making his comeback after a near 7-year absence, and as part of his deal to return to the cage, the UFC allowed several of his training partners to appear on the undercard, including close family friend Sano. Sano had been known from his previous fights for his tendency to leave his chin out in striking exchanges, and against the hard-hitting Semelsberger, many fans feared the worst for the 31-year-old. Their fears were realized immediately.
Martin Sano. Oh, my goodness gracious. See another one for good measure.
Semelsberger exploited Sano's defense by finishing the Californian in 14 seconds, one of the fastest losses by a debuting fighter in UFC history. While Sano hoped to continue his tenure, his time with the promotion was connected to Diaz, and when Stockton's finest showed little interest in pursuing his career post-266, Sano's days in the promotion were numbered. Sano hasn't competed since the Semelsberger fight, his 9-year wait for another victory becoming one of the longest in MMA. Liang Na showed fans the pitfalls of signing fighters based on their nationality. Na had spent most of her career competing for the WLF promotion in China. While her 19-4 record looked impressive, the fighter's inability to handle a jump in competition led to accusations of being a can crusher. But with the UFC looking for Chinese talent to cash in on Zhang Weili's success, Dragon Girl was given a shot at the big stage. Na faced a unique pressure for her company debut. UFC 261 was the promotion's first crowd show for 13 months, with Na's match against Ariane Carnelossi given the honor of opening the card. Fans in Jacksonville hoped for an all-action war to justify their long wait. They weren't disappointed.
Leon Na's one of them. Here we go. She was in. Right hand for Leon Na!
Na and Carnelossi engaged in a fast-paced brawl of scrambles and submission attempts, before Na's notoriously poor cardio started to show at the end of the first round, giving Carnelossi a comfortable win in the early stages of the second. Na returned to action at UFC 275 against Silvana Juarez, who was also looking for her first win since her company debut the previous year. Many believe Na had the grappling to beat Juarez if she avoided her opponent's trademark right hand. The key word being if.
Gotta be careful.
Na tried to reverse her fortunes by moving up to flyweight for a match with JJ Aldrich. The new class did little to help Na's conditioning, as Aldrich, a fighter noted for her tepid style, claimed the first knockout win of her UFC career. Given Aldrich's last stoppage come against a fighter wearing a cat onesie, that's saying something. Na still remains under contract at the time of recording, but a dramatic turnaround is needed if she wishes to retain her place in the promotion. Alimale McFarlane used a viral KO to propel her to a Bellator title. The UFC's attempt to do the same thing with Braxton Smith proved far less successful. Smith started MMA full-time in 2022 following a failed football career, and built a cult following due to his aggressive style, with all his fights ending in the first 2 minutes. What added to the attraction was Braxton's background, with the fighter admitting his early success came despite having zero MMA training. That and being a 5'11", 260-pound heavyweight. It didn't take long for the UFC to catch wind of Braxton's virality, and on 3 weeks' notice was given his company bout against Parker Porter at UFC 288. Braxton began the fight in trademark fashion, swinging overhands at the slow-starting Porter and even rocking the veteran during a series of wild flurries. Braxton was justifying the hype, looking like a world beater. For about a minute.
Oh, Braxton's already tired! Braxton's tired! Oh, shit!
Braxton was taken down by Porter following a major adrenaline dump, and with no idea of what to do on the ground, was finished 2.5 minutes into the bout. While most short-notice fighters would be given a second chance, the UFC had already seen enough. Braxton was released from his contract a month later after one of the company's worst performances in years. Braxton suffered his final blow a few weeks later, when he was granted a 2-year suspension by USADA after failing a pre-fight drug test for performance-enhancing drugs. Or simply drugs in this case. The sanction rules Braxton out of action until April 2025, making a meme super fight with Chris Barnett little more than a pipe dream. Ike Villanueva promised little on his UFC debut and delivered even less. Villanueva had spent most of his career as a journeyman, bouncing between smaller promotions and even fighting as low as middleweight, but by 2020 had amassed a 4-fight winning streak, including a win over UFC veteran Rashad Coulter. When the world shut down during COVID-19, the UFC looked for every available fighter to keep their shows together, leading to Villanueva taking on Chase Sherman in one of the company's first lockdown cards. Villanueva was quickly outclassed, being pieced apart by Sherman's boxing before succumbing to strikes early in the second round. It would be a sign of things to come, as Villanueva's speed along with his inability to defend leg kicks saw him overwhelmed by even the lowest competition, including losses to Marcin Practiao and Jordan Wright, but his willingness to fight on short notice saw him become a regular fixture of the company's Apex cards. Villanueva's tenure had one major highlight, when he took on fellow maligned fighter Vinicius Moreira at Fight Island. Villanueva got the better of the Brazilian during a competitive opening round before finally breaking his UFC duck in explosive fashion.
Oh, just like that! Right as you lined it out!
Villanueva's final appearance came against Tyson Pedro in 2022. Much like Hunsucker, Villanueva had little answers for the fast-starting Aussie, being finished by a barrage of leg kicks late in the first round. It proved the final straw for the UFC, who released Villanueva from his contract a few months later after a 1-5 record with the promotion. And now, time for a few dishonorable mentions. Jake Collier had failed during his first UFC run in 2017. 3 years and an extra 80 pounds did little to change his fortunes.
Oh! What a finish!
That's it!
Wow!
Count for Tom Aspinall in his debut!
Mike Blood Diamond Mathita stumbled out of the traps and onto a place on this list.
That's it!
Oh, wow!
He went out!
Wow!
Lilia Shakarova suffered a submission loss to Lauren Murphy before returning to her day job as a Beatles impersonator. This is the INC. Please like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss a video.